presentation essentially follows on from ones that I've done previously, such as Mars, pyramids and changes in the solar system, and another one I did called Secrets in the Solar System. And we're just briefly going to look at the history of, open quote, discovery of, open bracket, signs of, close brackets, water on Mars, and history of discovery of signs of life on Mars. And we're going to look at a couple of possible large structures on the surface of Mars. And we're also going to look at a couple of odd predictions about Mars found in comic art. A brief history of Mars exploration then. The first attempt was made in the Russian Marsnik program with Marsnik 1, which was in 1960, but most of the early attempts failed. Various things crashing and exploding on launch or soon after launch or going off course. Mariner 4 was the first successful probe, and a flyby took place in July 1965, and that was covered on the radio by Richard C. Hoagland, who you'll read a lot about on the web and various videos and so forth. A sort of slightly unusual character, shall we say. There have been over 50 mission attempts with a number of failed and aborted missions, both from the USA and from Russia. But Russia hasn't really launched any missions for a fair number of years now. Really, if we believe what we're told, the most sophisticated attempt to date is probably the current Curiosity rover, which is about as big as a car. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later on, thanks to Richard D. Hall. Now, in talking about the search for water and life on Mars, the journey really starts with Viking 1 and Viking 2. The primary mission objectives for this were to obtain high-resolution images of the surface and characterise the surface and composition of the atmosphere and surface, and characterise the structure and composition of the atmosphere and surface, and search for evidence of life. Viking 1 was launched on August 20th, 1975 and arrived at Mars on June the 19th, 1976. Viking 2 was launched on September the 9th, 1975 and arrived at Mars on the 8th of July, 1976. The total cost of the Viking project was roughly $1 billion. Richard Hoagland claims that when Viking landed on Mars, the initial pictures showing a grey or bluish sky, like on the left, were deliberately changed in the first 2 hours to show the reddish colour on the right. Now, Barry E. DiGregorio and Gilbert Levin corroborate this story in a book called Mars, the Living Planet. And you can read that by getting a copy from Amazon or what have you. So I have this very, very peculiar situation of the colours apparently being changed on the TV monitors at Mission Control. And I also played a bit of a clip about this in the Secrets in the Solar System presentation. But looking in detail at that, if you do that, you'll find websites such as this by Holger Isenberg. Now, just to explain this briefly, the pictures that are taken on Mars by the Viking lander, or were, and you'll see even the Curiosity rover pictures now are largely still given in black and white, and that seems to be just the accepted standard now, despite the fact that we've all got high resolution digital cameras in our pockets now, or many of us have on these mobile phones that we have. So what Holger Isenberg did is he took the original red, green and blue images, and that's basically what you do is you have a black and white camera, but you take 3 images for each one that you want to have, and you put them through a red, green and blue filter in turn, and you have 3 images, and then you combine those, and that will give you magically almost a full colour image. And what Holger Isenberg did was he took the original 3 separate images, combined them, and he got the picture shown above from a typical Viking image, which is rather different to the sort of one that NASA gets below. And I've got a little sort of segment there of how you can restore this reddish colour by using image processing software such as Photoshop or PaintShop Pro. It's trivially easy to do this now. So we've had a lot of fuss, as I speak now in November 2015, and if we go back a few years now, we can see that something is not quite right here. The recent fuss has been about discovering liquid water. So what I wanted to highlight was that this is not new. So this is an example of two of the recent versions of this story. On the left we have a National Geographic story, and it says, water on Mars, what does it really mean? A new find of liquid water fuels hopes that life may yet exist on the red planet. And we're going to talk about more about that in a bit. And then the BBC story, for example, Mars satellite hints at liquid water, 29th September 2015. NASA scientists believe that dark stripes on Mars are caused by trickling water. Data from one of the US Space Agency's satellites shows the features which appear on slopes to be associated with salt deposits. Such deposits could alter the freezing and vaporization points of water, keeping it in a fluid state long enough to move. Really? But let's check the archives, shall we, on this one? Now we have this story, for example, from 1979. It's on NASA's own website, which is, it says here, this colour image shows a thin layer of water ice frost on the Martian surface Utopia Planitia. And here is that story. So you can see it on NASA's own website. And if we just take that image and correct the colours, thanks to Holger Isenberg, then we get this interesting photograph. And then we move forward 21 years to year 2000, June 26th. And this is from Astronomy Picture of the Day. Explanation: what could have formed these unusual channels inside a small crater that lies inside the large Newton crater on Mars? Numerous narrow channels run from the top down to the crater floor. The above picture covers a region spanning about 3,000 metres across. These and other gullies have been found on Mars in recent high-resolution pictures taken by the orbiting Mars Global Surveyor robot spacecraft, otherwise known as MGS. Similar channels on Earth are formed by flowing water, but on Mars the temperature is normally too cold and the atmosphere too thin to sustain liquid water. Nevertheless, many scientists now hypothesize that liquid water did burst out here from underground Mars, eroded the gullies, and then pooled at the bottom as it froze and evaporated. If so, life-sustaining ice and water might exist even today below the Martian surface, water that could potentially support a human mission to Mars. Research into this exciting possibility is sure to continue. Okay. January 2004. Scientists are intrigued by the marks Spirit's airbags left on the surface of Mars. This is when the Spirit Rover landed. The soil shows an unusual cohesiveness, almost as if the soil grains were stuck together like mud. Steve Squires is also puzzled. The way in which the surface has responded is bizarre. It looks like mud, but it can't be mud. So what do you need to form mud? Last time I checked, you need liquid water. 11 years ago. And there's a picture from the rover, and you can see many of these pictures. I just happened to pick that one out, so I found it when I was looking at another page. You can see where I put the arrow. You don't get that on a sandy beach, above where the sea goes and you've got all the dry sand. You can't get ridges like that. Their picture shows that rover is moving in mud. You wouldn't get the wind piling it up like that. You need a sort of cohesiveness in the soil to leave an impression like that. It's got like these little ridges on the wheels if you look at the wheels. This is a picture from December the 5th, 2004. Left image is before and the right image is after. See that shiny bit there? What does that look like to you? And that's from a thing called the moss bower, which I think I've got on the next slide. This came off Charles Schultz's site. I've got all the image numbers. Well, I've got some of the image numbers. So that's where this probe has been pressed into the allegedly dry Martian soil, and something has stuck to it, as you can see there where the arrow is, and that's the impression it left in the soil. That's nearly 11 years ago. with another probe. 28th of July 2005, different space agency. This is ESA. Perspective view of crater with water ice looking east. And it's blue. Could it be reflecting the colour of the sky? Liquid water on Mars. 2006, December the 6th. Nearly 9 years ago. Yeah, and that's what they were, exactly what they were pointing out. And there's you can find a video of the press release of this. They had a big press release about this as well, and that was 9 years ago, almost. ASA photographs have revealed bright new deposits seen in 2 gullies on Mars that suggest water carried sediment through them sometime during the past 7 years, because obviously those pictures are not new. These observations give the strongest evidence to date that the water still flows occasionally on the surface of Mars, said Michael Mayer, lead scientist for NASA's exploration program, Washington. That's from their own website, NASA's own website. I've got the link at the bottom. Liquid water on Mars, 2011, 4th of August. This time they've given us an animated GIF. This is from NASA's own website. Observations from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter have revealed possible flowing water during the warmest months on Mars. NASA's Mars exploration program keeps bringing us closer to determining whether the red planet could harbour life in some form, NASA Administrator Charles Bolden said, and it reaffirms Mars as an important future destination for human exploration. Dark finger-like features appear and extend down some Martian slopes during late spring through summer, fade in winter, and return during the next spring. Repeated observations have tracked the seasonal changes in these recurring features on several steep slopes in the middle latitudes of Mars' southern hemisphere. From NASA's own website. So, life discovered on Mars. That's the announcement everyone's waiting for, right? Because if you get water, you're going to get life. Viking landers carried a life detection experiment. I've spoken about this before, called labelled release. The results seen by the life detection experiment were said an initial positive result for many years to be erroneous and due to the action of oxidants in the Martian soil. Space.com, 28th July 2001. Several scientists have found compelling evidence that Viking Mars landers did indeed discover life on the red planet in 1976. A re-examination of findings relayed to Earth by the probe some 25 years ago, claim the experts, show the telltale signs of microbes lurking within the Martian soil. The inventor of the labelled release experiment, Gilbert Levin, and he did a colour analysis as well, like the one I showed you earlier, said the Viking LR experiment detected living microorganisms in the soil of Mars. He added that after years of tests and over 24 non-biological explanations later, none of the attempts to establish the oxidants mimicry of the LR data did so. So he says his experiment worked and it detected life in the soil of Mars. And that was in 1976 again, the original Viking missions. In July 2004, it was stated by Professor Vittorio Formisano that Mars Express, he's an ESA scientist, had detected ammonia, methane and even formaldehyde in the Martian atmosphere. These are biomarker gases indicating ongoing life processes. In February 2005, Formisano said, "My observations should not be taken as a statement that there is life on Mars today, because we need to go there to drill the soil, take samples and analyse them, before possibly concluding that life is there." Oh, really, Mr. Formisano? I think that's a great idea. Sadly for you, they did it 29 years before you said that, for the Viking. And they said they got a positive result, or initially they did, and then they said it wasn't. And that's a ESA image on the left, and a Mars Global Surveyor image on the right. That's left is from the ESA, the European Space Agency. The right one is the same area, is from NASA. So why have we got this black and white versus a colour image? Well, I don't know the answer, but it's interesting to note that that looks like it could be chlorophyll in that image. In other words, that's the green chemical that gives grass, leaves and so forth their coloration. This is what's involved in photosynthesis to create oxygen from carbon dioxide and sunlight. And then they announced methane again 5 years later. So we've got a 4 or 5 year cycle of them repeating the same type of news. NASA methane clouds could be evidence of life on Mars. Belfast Telegraph, January 15, 2009. I also eventually found the NASA page about that. So it's essentially a repeat of the Formisano story. And on the same date, NASA posted, Martian methane reveals red planet is not a dead planet. They actually put that on their website. 2012, 4th of December, Wired magazine. Curiosity rover detects water and organic compounds on Mars. The rover also detected its first organic compounds in the form of chlorinated methane, created during the analysis process within the sample analysis at Mars tool. However, while the chlorine is definitely from Mars, the carbon might be of more earthly origin, carried to the planet by the rover. So, again, they've got their get out of jail free card. And then what happened with this story is on the 13th of December 2012, which is just over a week later, Discovery News reports, where's Mars methane? Curiosity draws a blank. So they can't get the story straight, seemingly. September 2013. NASA says there is no life on Mars. It's from the Daily Mail. I won't read it all out, I think you're getting the idea. December 16, 2014, a year later. Curiosity detects methane spike on Mars. NASA's Mars Curiosity rover has measured a 10-fold spike in methane, an organic chemical in the atmosphere around it, and detected other molecules in a rock powder sample collected by the laboratories at the robotic laboratories drill. So, to get methane again. And so we come back to now. September the 29th, 2015. I think this is just an advert for a science fiction film myself. That's my level of cynicism at the moment.
Have you seen that film?
No, and I won't be seeing it either. Ridley Scott confirms, this was in the Breitbart website, Ridley Scott, the director of Alien and other science fiction films, Prometheus. Yeah, Blade Runner indeed, yes, I've forgotten that obvious one. Confirms NASA timed Mars water find to boost Damon's Martian movie. On one level, The Martian may be functioning as a giant advertisement for NASA, but the close collaboration between the Space Agency and Ridley Scott's filmmaking team has resulted in the director remaining blasé about the dramatic announcements of evidence of flowing water on Mars. I knew that months ago, he said, in response to the news. Well, I knew it, Mr. Scott, years ago. Probably at least 10 years ago when I first put this presentation together. Scott said he had seen the photographs of water flows about 2 months ago, meaning it was too late to incorporate the revelation into the film's narrative. Well, of course, that's rubbish, because I've shown you pictures from year 2000 and year 2009, which was announced by NASA. And there's even a video of that announcement that you can find. So, on the subject of Mars and things like films and TV, what about this fella?
The assistant wants to know, do you believe in extraterrestrial life?
Of course. It is beyond a certainty that there is life out there. Just mathematical certainty. The way life takes place and the tenacity with which life holds and the extreme conditions under which life can take place, that there is no question that there is life in outer space and in the other galaxies and in our galaxy, I'm sure. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret that I've been told not to reveal. So I won't reveal who told me. But there is going to be information about Mars that won't be too long away about the existence of life.
Life as we know it?
No.
Biological life?
No.
I mean,
Well,
carbon-based
what do we
life?
know? Well,
we know life. Life means we all are carbon-based entities.
Yes,
I mean,
but
what
with
if it's,
two arms and two legs.
well,
And a frontal eye. No,
whatever.
not necessarily.
Not like as we understand it.
No. But life as we defined it, which is something that can replicate itself, is one of the definitions. I think. That is a certainty.
Wow.
And it may very well be on Mars when the next vehicle gets there. It will have the facility to look under the ground into the water areas. There is a great deal of opinion that they're going to find life. Microbial.
So, if it's real data from these landers and rovers, others seem to have made more of it.
I believe that Viking found life, and I think that maybe not intentionally, but scientists painted the wrong picture of what happened. You know, the message was put out that Viking found nothing more than unusual active chemicals in the soil, that basically Mars was dead. And that's had a profound effect on everything that's followed, including the direction of the whole space program. So the question is, where did things go wrong? Well, back in '76, two identical spacecraft, Viking 1 and 2, landed on Mars. They both carried miniature biology labs, kind of about the size of a microwave oven. It was quite small, but they had 3 experiments which were looking directly for life on Mars, and they were the first spacecraft to do this, and incredibly, the only spacecraft that have ever looked for life on another planet. You know, in the 30-odd years since then, we've never sent out another probe to look for life, and that's because the mainstream science said Viking didn't find anything. So, you know, they carried out some experiments. I just want to zero in a couple of them. One was called the label release experiment. One was called the pyrolytic release. And the agreement was beforehand, if any of these experiments found a positive signal, then we would say that they'd found life on Mars, and that was thrown out the window later on. So what the label release experiment did was it took a sample of Martian soil, it dripped some water onto it, some goodies, some nutrients, kind of like a chicken soup type of thing for bacteria. And the neat thing was that those nutrients were laced with radioactive carbon. And the hope was that any bugs in the soil would metabolize that food and they'd give off radioactive carbon dioxide, which you could then pick up with a radiation detector, a Geiger counter. And lo and behold, that's exactly what it found, a big rush of radioactive carbon dioxide, which lasted for about 3 days. Exactly what you'd expect if there were bacteria in the soil, and not what you'd expect if there was a chemical reaction. It wouldn't last that long. There's no way. The other experiment, the pyrolytic release experiment, showed that organic chemicals were manufactured in the soil by something. That's kind of hard to explain without life going on. Mm-hmm. And these two together gave life signals. So why didn't scientists say that Viking had found life? Because according to the pre-agreed criteria before Viking ever left the launch pad, both of those experiments found life. The reason was there was another instrument on board Viking, which was called the GCMS. That stands for Gas Chromatograph Mass Spectrometer. And the whole purpose of that instrument was to look for organics, organic material, anything containing carbon, basically, in the Martian soil. And that came up negative. It didn't find a single thing. It didn't find a single carbon-containing molecule in the soil. And it was used as a court of appeal, basically. So you've got 2 experiments saying, yeah, there's life here by pre-agreed criteria. Another instrument says there can't be life, no organics, you can't have life. But that instrument wasn't working properly. And we know it wasn't working properly. It's been demonstrated. It was demonstrated even before Viking took off, although it wasn't really well known or advertised. But in several studies since then, identical equipment to the GCMS has been tested on Antarctic soils, on soils from deserts regions on Earth, which are similar to Mars, and it has failed to find life where we know there is life by other instruments. And so this Court of Appeal instrument was faulty. We know it couldn't have detected organic material on Mars, and yet that's the way it panned out, that scientists used that as a way to say there's no life on Mars. So the GCMS found nothing, And so what did the Viking scientists team do? They dismissed the positive readings of the other two experiments. And they said that the activity in the soil was due to some kind of reactive chemical like hydrogen peroxide, and that was that.
That was from the Phoenix lander. Those images were all from the Phoenix lander, yeah, which was another probe that landed, I think, near the polar regions, I think in 2009. And it lasted about 6 months, and it had a microscope on it. So they were looking at the soil close up, but, you know, with a sort of 20, 30, 40, 50 times magnification on a microscope. But what I was pointing out in that video, I think I've probably shown that here before, but it's probably a while ago. Those images with the animation, they were created not by NASA, but by, you know, sort of somebody like me who went through all the images, made animations, and then made it into that video, which, as you saw in the little clip, he said that was shown on CNN. Some of it, maybe not all of it. And the narrative was an astronomer called David Darling, who used to appear on Coast to Coast, and he was explaining about the Viking experiment, which you probably hopefully picked up from the audio. So I've put the two together. That was my doing. And those things can't have been moved by wind. It wasn't dust particles being blown by the wind. Now, again, I've shown these images here before. So we seem to have, from NASA's own images, trilobites, and crinoids, other types of fossils. Let's see.
Well, last month, a NASA scientist in Alabama stunned the world when he said he discovered evidence of alien life. His claim was based on fossil remains he supposedly found in a meteorite. The next day, however, NASA said their researchers' work was flawed and unreliable. However, claims of alien life in fossils are nothing new for NASA. For the past 7 years, they've been dealing with the Winnsboro man and his research. And his work may very well change our way of thinking forever.
Ever since the Viking probe landed on Mars in 1976, NASA has been trying to find out if life once existed or if it still exists there today. 30 years later, in December of 2006,
today you will hear what many are saying may be the most significant discoveries to date.
NASA scientists released photographs that suggest there is life. Pictures that show water on Mars.
We can honestly talk about liquid water on the surface of Mars today.
The news was reported in the national media and was hailed as a major discovery. The only problem, another man says he made the very same discovery nearly 3 years earlier.
You came to the conclusion that there was water and life on Mars when?
The date when I was first certain of it was February 15th, 2004. Charles Schultz looks and sounds like a modern-day Einstein. Using the Freedom of Information Act, he obtained more than 200,000 Mars images from NASA. And after thousands of hours of research, he came to some startling conclusions. Many of the things that I've seen look very clearly like the recent erosion or presence of water, liquid water on the surface, and many of the images show what appear to be fossil organisms, marine fossils. Right, fossils on Mars, and not just a few. Schultz says the planet is littered with them. Right now, the planet has extremely thin air, very tough living conditions, but it is wet on the surface in many areas, and it is covered with fossil remains from marine organisms. Some of the fossils we found are seashells, and very clearly they are identical to the things we'd find on the Earth. This is a conch shell, apparently, found on the planet Mars, and this is one on the Earth. And you can see there's an absolute identical appearance to both of them. Schultz showed me picture after picture. This is a trilobite fossil. All NASA images. Opportunity, the rover found on the 158th day of its imaging. And all of them compelling.
This clearly looks like water flow to me and mud.
It is.
The rover, the Opportunity, these Mars crafts that have gone up there and literally have gotten stuck in the mud?
In many cases, yes. Schultz's research has the potential to change the way we think about the universe. He's written numerous articles for scientific magazines and books on the subject. The latest is A Fossil Hunter's Guide to Mars. In it, he carefully lays out his research and conclusions.
NASA explained your findings.
Actually, they've ignored it. In the beginning, when I began posting a lot of my information and sending it to them as well, there was some interest, and my website had hits from 40 to 90% from Mars researchers, NASA particularly, and other agencies. But over time, the died off and there was no response. So they actually pretty much ignored what I posted.
NASA Director Charlie Bolden won't speculate on the potential for water or fossils on Mars, but he's hoping the next rover mission, Curiosity, will answer those questions once and for all. It takes off this November. The first data is expected by the fall of next year.
We expect to make discoveries with Curiosity. I don't want to, set great expectations. What we find will be different from what we found before. It will look at the soil of Mars. It's looking for any signs of microbes or microbial life there. It's absolutely incredible what it's going to do.
And when I pressed him on Schultz's claims of fossils on Mars,
I don't know. I wish I could say yes, I do, but I don't know. I really don't.
Bolden referred me to a NASA scientist who's been working on the very same subject.
This activity, especially the fact that it's going on today, to me says that the mid-latitudes of Mars are one of the more remarkable places in the solar system.
Phil Christensen is well known for his work on Mars. Remember that December '06 announcement of water on Mars? Well, Christensen was there, and NASA's conclusions were supported by his research.
NASA's goal, long-term goal, is to land on Mars, collect rocks, and bring them back to Earth so that we can examine them in laboratories here under microscopes and look for any evidence of fossils or any other evidence of ancient life on Mars. I'm very confident that that rover will make discoveries that will really change our thinking. Again, every time we look, we find an interesting place. There were clearly environments on Mars billions of years ago that were very much like the Earth. And, it's very possible that life may have started there. Again, that would be a fantastic discovery, and that could be coming in the next year or so.
I think that they have been ready with this for a very long time. The first researchers on the mirror teams, the rover teams, included an oceanographer, a marine biologist who was looking at the images. And that's very telling in its own right.
Schultz believes disclosure will happen next year once the rover sends images back to Earth. It's something he says could have happened sooner, but didn't because of religious beliefs.
Many people allow their beliefs to dominate regardless of the facts. And it's not a stab at religion. This is just a presentation of the facts. People who have faith find a way to live with the facts.
You're dealing with science.
That's absolutely correct. You have to work with science and facts.
Is there life on Mars right now?
I do believe so, because nothing we know of would have sterilized the entire planet. Funguses, spores, bacteria could very easily still be in the soil today.
Well, despite his research, Schultz says he's not the person who first discovered life on Mars. He said that honor belongs to Viking mission scientist and current Arizona State University professor, Dr. Gary Levin. Levin believes he discovered microbial life from the soil samples taken from the 2 Viking missions from the 1970s. But NASA has never embraced those findings. Well, a huge announcement from NASA today. Their scientists believe water is flowing on the surface of Mars, and it's believed to be salt water, which could still theoretically sustain life. NASA says striking new images from the mountains of Mars may be their best evidence yet of flowing liquid water. Those images appear to show some sort of water flow on the Mars surface. Now, if true, NASA says this has profound implications in the search for extraterrestrial life. But today's NASA announcement is nothing new for a Winnsboro man. Charles Schultz has been studying the so-called red planet for years, and back in April, he told News 19 viewers that there's microbial life and water on Mars. He believes NASA has known this for years and is releasing the information a little at a time.
Little by little, the information is being given to the public to sort of prepare them for what's to come. The flow of water and the creation of mud is very common on the planet Mars, even today. And this mud flow is terraced. It's in layers, just as you'd expect in any place where the water's flowed. You can see how it's moved around here. And this is actually the geyser that probably was the source of that water. For 45 years, we believed Mars to be as dry as the moon, and yet constantly we're given information that tells us that's not so. It's loaded with water and mineral resources. It's another planet just like the Earth.
If you remember our story back in April, Charles tried to give NASA his findings, and they basically wouldn't listen to him.
So there you go, you saw the very video clips, and it's as if those had never been broadcast. With all this nonsense that we've had recently. Now, look at some other bits and pieces of these rovers. I'll just point out that the Curiosity rover has now been on Mars for 3 years. Yet we've had, Charlie Baldwin was saying, oh, we're going to find all these new things. And what do we get? We get 25th of September liquid water on Mars. It's the same story. It's the same story. That's why I called it more repeats than on Dave, this presentation. Because it is. Somebody discovered, I didn't discover this photograph, but the top photograph is from Mars, the bottom photograph is from the Earth, and it looks like some type of fossilized creature, and we're going to come back to this. So there's a sort of closer view of it. It's a different type of fossil, but it's this, the way that the rock is angled out, it looks like some fossilized bones sticking out of the soil, which have been found on the Earth in certain places. This one, I've just thrown a few of these in for you to have a look at. This was on Joe Skipper's website, but it is, I checked and found the original NASA images. So what's that? It looks like a metronome, as he said. Probably roughly the same size, I think. So we've got to ask, what's NASA really showing us? Has anyone in this room yet got the feeling that we're being strung along here 30 years, from what I've shown you? I've certainly got that feeling. I wouldn't have said this probably 15 years ago, but now I don't see any other thing than we're being strung along, And you've probably seen me show this picture here before. This is from David Percy's website. I made this little animation here, but the images are from his website. David Percy's written he's written the book 2/3. He's done a documentary called What Happened on the Moon, about the Apollo hoax. And he's noted the correspondence between Avebury and Cydonia, which is this region on Mars, quite near where the face on Mars is. And I think, as I've said here, there's a story we're not being told. I haven't shown this one here before, even though I've had it on my website for a while. This is a high-rise image from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter on the left. And on the right, we have the green-coloured image is a burial mound in Japan called a kofun, and the bottom image is a relief map of a similar kofun. I don't think it's the same one. But I don't think I need to explain the correspondence, do I? So what's going on with that? And these, what do we get? Liquid water, folks. Huh? What about this? Why aren't you doing press releases about this? Structure found on Mars, similar to kofun on Earth. I've mentioned this slide before, Arthur C. Clarke. I'm going to talk a little bit more about him in a minute, but he said on 6th of June 2001, I'm quite serious when I say have a really good look at these new Mars images. Something is actually moving and changing with the seasons. That suggests at least vegetation, he said. Clarke repeated several times that he was serious about his observations, pointing out that he sees something akin to banyan trees in some of the Mars Global Surveyor photos, and that's what he was referring to at that time. And we've had no more on this either. We've heard nothing about this, not in the main news. And then this guy says that this is June's defrosting. June's defrosting. Sand dunes defrosting. But curiously, others have pointed out that Arthur C. Clarke's writings about the monolith being found near Ampetus, for example, that has also been something similar to that, seems to have been picked up in a picture by Cassini. And also we have the Sentinel, which developed into 2001 A Space Odyssey. Wilson, a geologist exploring the moon, tells of the experience of discovering a pyramid-shaped object that indicates the presence of extraterrestrial intelligence. He describes the experience of discovery and creates a story that reflects the meaning of the object. And I think the pyramid became a monolith. But isn't it strange how he discovered a pyramid on the moon? And if you look at this book cover again, I don't think I need to tell you about this too much, because that book, I believe, was published in 1960 or 1961, Against the Fall of Night. And what does that cover look like? Perhaps it looks something like the face on Mars. And that was in a comic strip in 1958. And apparently somebody was pointing out that this nodule, or whatever you want to call it, in the middle has also apparently been discovered on the real, pictures of the face on Mars. So, isn't that strange? 1958. And that's from a comic book series called Race for the Moon. And this is from Wayne Herschel's site. He's got a very interesting site called The Hidden Records, and he's had quite a lot of hassle, apparently, according to what his interviews have said. And then we had another strange coincidence in comic art. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons were creating the Watchmen comic in 1986 and 87, and they happened to be at the centre of a similar coincidence, only this time with a smiley face. As we've seen below, this coincidence was one of several. In a 2000 interview for Blather, Moore stated, "We didn't know that there was a smiley face on Mars. We discovered halfway through that there was a crater on Mars that looked like a giant smiley face." And that image on the bottom is from Google Mars. And you can see it's quite similar. You've got this feature here, and now you've got a sort of fairly clear eye there, and a less well-defined eye there, and that's very similar to how they've got it in this image too. As you may have heard me speak here before about the Apollo missions, I have now no doubt at all that those Apollo missions did not land on the moon, as I said. And I've discovered more evidence about that since I did the presentation here. So, just mentioning some of that in summary, I've got this presentation called Apollo Removing Truth's Protective Layers, which I did 5 years ago. One of the things I came across in that, the lunar rover battery could not really have operated. According to their specifications, the surface of the moon is too hot. Some people claim that the heat sink fins on the battery would cool it enough. I don't agree, because you don't have any convection currents on the moon. You need a very efficient radiative system to re-radiate all the heat on somewhere like the moon. The cameras for the Apollo missions were not special. They were standard sort of Earth cameras, and also the film was not special. How did it survive the intense heat? It was over 100 degrees centigrade, average temperature on the moon. This is one of the killers for me. The Charlie Duke photo, not a photo of a shadow or anything like that. This is if you read NASA's story on this one, they put this photograph on the surface of the moon to be rephotographed. This is Charlie Duke's family, yet the photograph doesn't even curl up. But it's just platinum plastic, and that surface would be, I think, something like 130 degrees centigrade. That's physically impossible. Michael Collins said in the press conference after the Apollo 11 landing, or splashdown, I should say, that he did not remember seeing any stars while he was in Apollo. The image at the top there was a 2009 image from Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's meant to be the Apollo 11 LEM, Lunar Excursion Module, according to NASA. Would you be convinced if somebody said that was a UFO, picture of a UFO that they took? Well, that's an official NASA photograph on their website. They've since, put on better images. Anyone who's interested in following this up can look at the videos of Gerard White, an Australian chap. He's in his late 20s. He's done some very extremely detailed videos, and he's also had a lot of problems with YouTube deleting his channel. So, if we accept, and I certainly accept, and I know that the Apollo missions were faked, and I will challenge anyone to prove that they were not faked, we have to consider that the Mars missions themselves may be faked too. I'm currently thinking that I'm still on the fence on this a bit, because I think the orbiters are real, but I'm wondering about the rovers. Now, really what set me onto this was the program that I did with Richard D. Hall, which I think aired just over a year ago. It was slightly less than a year, I think it aired in January, and we recorded it about a year ago. And Richard is going to be back on the TV on November the 3rd, if anybody's interested. He's got a new series coming up, 11 o'clock at night, starting next week, I think. Some people have suggested that the rovers aren't on Mars at all, but they're in remote earthly locations such as Devon Island. And I've got a couple of clips that I've put together here for about 10 minutes. And this is mainly what Richard's put together, and we discussed it together in an interview which went out on TV last year. or maybe it didn't actually. They might have put it out just on the internet. And because, for example, we've got a blue sky in some of those images, that might indicate the rovers are actually on Earth, not on Mars. Charles Schultz has found the fossils. They could actually all be Earth fossils if the rovers are really on Earth, and so forth. But I'll play this. It's about 10 minutes, I think, this one together.
Okay, we're going to open it up to questions now from the news media. And let me wait for a microphone to come over to you, and go ahead and give us your name and affiliation right there in the middle of the row. Go ahead, Craig.
With America's Space. Adam, tell us about the landing.
All right, Greg. I can't tell you too much about it. I mean, it looks good. I'm being a little flip. In short, it looked extremely clean. We touched down in conditions that were on the more benign side of our nominal expectation. By the way, I want to preface everything. This is preliminary data scooped with the sieve in the cacophony of the control room during the celebration, right? And largely by my good friend Miguel San Martin, who's somewhere out there, I hope. At any rate, very nominal, remarkably good. Our navigation error was on the low side of our expectation, which meant that we probably had a good alignment between the celestial sensors and the inertial sensors, the IMU. Our powered flight appears to have been excellent. If my good friend Ben Toma is in the house, is Ben in the house? We landed with 140 kilograms of fuel reserves out of a total of 400 kilos that we carried in. And Ben worked quite diligently in stretching the tanks at my insistence because I was worried we wouldn't have enough fuel. And so I think I owe Ben a little bit of an apology there. So it looked good, in short. Good and clean. And it looks, at least by my eyeball, that we landed in a nice, flat spot. Beautiful. Really beautiful.
Shani Jardin from boingboing.net, and I'm a stand-in for Miles O'Brien with PBS NewsHour tonight.
You look more attractive than Miles.
I won't tell him that, Adam.
Okay.
I think he heard it.
I have to ask you, what kind of file type, can you tell us about the image file type and compression that was used to send this very important couple of thumbnails back from Mars?
Yes, unfortunately, I absolutely cannot. If Justin Mackey is in the room, or there's a couple other people on the team who'd be able to whip that out quickly, but I couldn't tell you. Sorry.
Okay, a serious question. A little more than 48 hours ago, you told me you would tell me a secret. Once Curiosity landed. Can I have my secret?
Yeah, what was this? A lot has happened in the last 48 hours. And to be very truthful, I do not recall what that secret was.
I'm going to hold you to this.
That's fine. Maybe I'll remember it.
Okay, we're going next over here.
Leo Enright from Irish Television. The Unmanned Spaceflight website has coordinates for the landing that go down to something like 5 decimal points. I just wanted to confirm with you that you do have those sort of coordinates. And am I reading those coordinates correctly when I see that it looks as though you've landed within 500 meters of the skirt around the mountain? That, I mean, you're really very close to the mountain at the closer end in the landing ellipse, and possibly within striking distance of the phyllosilicate trench.
I can't confirm that. My estimate, I'm looking for somebody, yes, there's somebody in the audience here who has that in the tip of their noggin. We should have soon that estimate, but I don't have it to 5 decimal places. We wouldn't report it to that because we're certain that we don't know it to that. And I don't know what the unmannedspaceflight.com estimate is.
Yeah, there's a team of people that are working on localization, including what information we got on the way down, you know, the nav filter, probably taking a picture of where, looking at the picture and trying to figure out from there where we are. I would imagine by tomorrow's press conferences, they should have a better idea where it came down, within a few 100 meters at least, hopefully.
The question, Henry, you're next.
Henry Bortman with Astrobiology Magazine. Can you tell us at what time Curiosity touched down, Earth received time, and at what time the first image came back?
I can tell you the first of those is 10:39 p.m. The second of those I don't have.
So, we couldn't really answer very many of the questions. Some of them we seem to do okay. But if you watch that whole thing, there's no science being discussed in that, really. They do a lot of cheering and whooping and clapping and shaking hands and standing up and saying, haven't we done well? But it's a very strange press conference, reminiscent of the Apollo 11 press conference, actually. And I've got another video clip. This is the landing system drop test. This is the test on Earth of the
Hi, I'm Savannah McCoy.
landing system they use to land Curiosity on the surface.
My job is to run system-level tests on the rover structure to ensure it's capable of the requirements.
You watch what a huge crowd they have assembled for this test.
Basically, for the Mars program, we build 2 rovers in parallel. One's the flight rover, and one's the test rover, or DTM. The main difference between the flight rover and the DTM rover is that the flight rover actually goes to Mars. Just recently, we ran a major test called the Sky Crane Full Motion Drop Test. This test is to check out the EDL sequence, or entry, descent, and landing sequence, for Curiosity. For the first time, we're going to be touching down on Mars with just the rover's wheels. So this is the sequence leading up to that touchdown on Mars. Because this test is so important to the project, almost all of the team wanted to gather and watch the test. We actually projected it into multiple conference rooms around the lab so that everyone could have access to this very large milestone for our project.
Test is commencing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
The reason we do all this testing is to prove that what we think is going to happen actually will happen when Curiosity gets to Mars, and that we really understand the dynamics of these vehicles. During this test, everything behaved as expected. We were able to collect all of the data and instrumentation that we were hoping for, so overall, definitely a huge success. I'm Savannah McCoy, and this has been your Building Curiosity Update.
There's something I've actually just noticed about that video there, something very obvious. That landing test there didn't actually land. The thing didn't even touch the ground. It wasn't suspended like from an aircraft or anything like that, because what they used allegedly to land this rover was, they call it the Sky Crane. So they had a sort of, the probe came down allegedly through the atmosphere, and then when it got close to the surface, the Sky Crane dropped the rover down, and then it slowed itself down with rockets, and then the rover detached and dropped onto the surface, allegedly, and then flew off. The Sky Crane flew off. I mean, again, I haven't put a video of that.
So we're going to look at.
So this is me discussing this with Richard.
We're going to look at the Curiosity and the Opportunity rovers, which are allegedly still
sending back pictures from Mars. Allegedly, yes.
And you know, moving around the surface of Mars. Now, we're just. I've got a section on the power ratings of the Opportunity rover, and in the document I compare it to a mobility scooter, because the weight of the Opportunity rover is 185 kilos, which is probably 2 largish people. Yeah, so it's reasonably heavy.
Yes.
So you would imagine, if you were to compare it to, let's say, a mobility scooter, which I think is probably a good comparison.
Yes.
Obviously, things weigh less on Mars. I think it's a factor of 2.6 times less on Mars. So okay,
yes.
it's maybe not 185 kilos equivalent load, but a mobility scooter maybe has let's say an 80 kilogram person. It's comparable. Now a mobility scooter typically consumes around about 500 watts of power. Now the Opportunity rover is rated at just 100 watts, which is no more than a sewing machine. So in the other thing which I go into detail in the document is how the batteries are charged with just 2 solar panels, which are delivering just 100 watts only for 4 hours a day, and this system has lasted for 10 years. Now
yes.
just think of your laptop battery, right? Because it's probably comparable, or maybe something slightly larger. It lasts in 10 years of charging and discharging.
The life of the batteries, because the Opportunity rover is supposed to have been roving around on Mars now for 10 years, powered by one rechargeable battery.
Lithium-ion battery.
Yes, and since when did those last 10 years?
You take those power figures and it does make you scratch your head a little bit. You know, of course they will argue, oh, well, you've got highly optimized electronics and drive systems, and you know, we use very low friction bearings in the motors, you know, it's been specially designed for this project and so forth. But when you do the numbers, you know, you start to, like you say, the 100 watts for 4 hours a day, and then also the solar panels, you know, if they're providing 100 watts of power allegedly for, as you say, 4 hours a day, it doesn't seem very much. And also the thing that came into my mind is these things are on Mars, so the sunlight is going to be what, you know, 20, 30, 40% weaker there. Allegedly the atmosphere is more dust laden, so how much more efficient have those solar panels got to be than they would have to be on Earth?
I mean, here's another interesting fact. The rover's operating temperature is -40 to +40 degrees centigrade. So presumably they've been tested to operate in that range. The average surface temperature of Mars is estimated to be -55 degrees C. That's the average temperatures of Mars. At the equator, which is obviously the hottest point, temperature varies from 20 degrees C maximum to -73 degrees minimum. so the temperature that they're on Mars at, -73, is way below the minimum operating temperature. So,
and that's right. And then you also consider in terms of, if anybody has ever taken their radio out into cold weather, or a torch, trying to switch it on, you'll find that the battery performance at those sorts of temperatures is very much reduced. And it's, you know, it's literally got to put it in your pocket to get the battery going again with a pocket torch or whatever. Anyone can try that. So how are they getting this power system to work?
So the types of batteries used is a lithium-ion battery. So it's nothing special. It's what you would find in a lot of laptops and mobile phones, and it's lasted over 10 years being charged and discharged probably every day.
Yeah.
And they're only charging it for 4 hours a day with a 100 watt max probably solar panel. So,
and I mean, I've pointed out with the Apollo missions, the Apollo rover that they used, the battery technology on that was operating way out of the specified temperature on the high end, you know, on the moon, you know, and that's in their own documents. So yeah, you've got some serious questions here, certainly.
And you know, if we just go back to the comparison that I've made in the document, imagine putting a mobility scooter on the moon, right, with a couple of solar panels on it. How long is it going to last without plugging it into the mains? I don't buy it.
Right.
All right, let's have a look at the Curiosity rover. Now, this is a different beast altogether. It's much bigger, more sort of the size of a car, much more highly powered, and this is the one that there was big fanfare a few years back when it allegedly landed on Mars, and we're going to look at that in a minute. But it uses a different power system, Andrew. This is using some sort of nuclear isotope power system.
The system, as I understand it, is basically uses some type of thermocouple, doesn't it, where you have the cool temperatures on the outside of the vehicle, and then you have the warmer temperature which is created by the radioactive decay from the isotope, and then you have a thermocouple set up between those 2 points, and that provides a current from the temperature difference. That's my understanding.
So
how
it's
that works.
right. I've said here, while it seems plausible that a radioisotope electric generator could provide enough energy to power Curiosity rover, the Opportunity rover seems unfit for purpose by comparison. Just to point out, all of these images that I'm going to show you are from NASA's published websites, and I've got the reference numbers for the images which will be put on the screen, so you can look them up yourself from NASA's website. Now, the first one we're going to look at is a Curiosity rover image. Image number PIA 16204. We'll put the whole image on the screen there, and you can see I've got a little red square marked at the left hand side of the screen there, because some of the evidence in these images is quite hard to see when you look at the whole landscape. But let's just zoom in to that little area that I've highlighted there, and what do we see on the screen there between these two rocks?
Well, there appears to be a small rodent in the picture.
Right. Well, in my opinion, that's some kind of rodent, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen this picture before, actually, before we had this conversation, and it is very strange that you see that image and you think, well, is that just a chance, you know, line of sight effect that we're seeing, or it really does look, as you say, like some type of lemming, or...
See, I originally found it in a video on YouTube, I think by Monty Williams. He thought it was a prairie dog, but if you look closely, it's not a prairie dog. I came to the conclusion that it was most likely a lemming. That's the closest match. And interestingly enough, one of the places where NASA test or claim to test and develop their rovers is in the Canadian Arctic at a place called Devon Island, a 300-mile long deserted Arctic island with a 23-kilometre meteorite crater in the middle of it, and there are indeed collared lemmings. It even looks like the right subspecies of lemming, with a tiny mark on its collar.
It's very, very unusual.
Lemmings have tiny little limbs because they live in such a cold environment. They have tiny little limbs. They can kind of curl up in their own fur. And indeed, in the photo, you can't see any limbs.
Now, one of the rovers was tested. It is known that they've done tests on a place called Devon Island.
Yes.
This is the largest unpopulated island in the world, very, very remote. But one of the creatures which is resident on that island and seen regularly is the Arctic lemming. Yeah, and there's we've got a picture of one on the screen there. So, are we looking at, in the Mars image, a picture of a lemming on Devon Island?
Well, this is the question that we need to present ourselves with, don't we? And I mean, Devon Island is northern Canada, isn't it? So it's in that sort of area, so it is very remote.
Let's have a look at this next image. Again, well, I'll give the reference 0109 MR 0684 022 000E1 NASA image, and just to the right hand side there, if we zoom into that.
Well, again, it wasn't me who initially spotted it. It was somebody on YouTube saying that it looks like a backbone, like a line of vertebrae, some kind of marine species, probably.
Clearly, it's some sort of vertebrae. That's not a random rock formation, in my opinion.
I would agree with that, and I've shown that image myself in one or two of the presentations that I've done. Yes.
Pretty difficult to describe that as a random rock formation.
Yeah, exactly.
How would an image of a vertebrate work itself into the Mars images? Well, again, perhaps it is somewhere like Devon Island where they've tested some of these rovers. A whale that's been beached, or one theory is that we get what are known as walrus graveyards, where hunters will come and kill a load of walruses and they'll take the tusks and all of the stuff that they want, and then they'll just leave the bodies to rot. So you'll get vertebrae lying around the ground, as we see there. And we see here on the screen a picture of a whale skeleton. So we're not biologists, so we haven't really identified what type of creature the vertebrae is from, but certainly pretty conclusive to me that that's some animal that's died, that's been on Earth.
Right, and I mean, you know, this brings us to the point of there are a number of these images, and we're going to come on to some more. So we have two alternatives, really. Either we're looking at images from Mars, and Mars once had creatures, like whales, like walruses, going around in its oceans or seas or whatever. Or we're looking at images from the Earth, which are purported to be from Mars, and either of those two gives us a problem with the official story of what's going on.
If you look at the lemming, it would say it has to have the life the same as Earth now.
Atmosphere,
How can a lemming exist in the Martian atmosphere with what is it, less than 1%?
Minus 73 degrees centigrade or whatever.
So
there's a few other remarkably bone-like rocks that have turned up in the photographs.
Well, let's turn to that one, because we've got that one next.
The best match I could find was walrus bones.
So Douglas Gibson has actually suggested that this bone on the surface of Mars is actually a walrus arm bone.
But that walrus forearm definitely seems to be the best match.
Right, so you think...
But if anyone knows more about sea mammalian bones, happy to be corrected.
Yeah, we can see the image there of a walrus skeleton. It does look very similar to some sort of arm bone of a sea creature such as a walrus.
It does, and I mean that particular image I'd not seen before I saw it in your document, the one of this. It does look like a bone, a hip bone or a thigh bone or something, or the walrus equivalent of whatever they would call it on a walrus. Yeah, very unusual.
If they are faking it, they would have to do it in extremely remote parts of the world, and interestingly, in some of the remotest Arctic regions, what they call the Arctic desert regions of the world, you can find what they call walrus graveyards, because walruses, the early hunters a couple of hundred years ago, they didn't even have to go out to sea. They could just find a huddle of walruses, because they crawl up on the land and shoot the whole lot of them and just take the tusks.
So that's Richard and me and Douglas Gibson discussing from last year. So actually, what are we being shown? We should always ask ourselves that question now. Not just about Mars, but about anything that you get put in front of you on any large-scale media. NASA keep re-announcing old news as if it is new. I think I've proved that to you. Hopefully I've proved that to you beyond any doubt. We probably cannot trust the most important parts of what they say, but should take note of details and for cross-checking. We cannot verify much of what they say from a second source. There's no other country that has sent rovers to Mars. It's only the USA, it's only NASA. And they have been shown to either lie or be economical with the truth. Again, why re-announce all the same news, for years and years and years? 5 times. And, just as importantly, I'm not a journalist. I don't work for a newspaper. Why aren't any science journalists, picking NASA up and saying, "Oi, you said this 10 years ago. Why are you saying it now? It's not new. What's new about it? And if there is something new about it, write it up properly. Don't just, repeat the same old trash." So it seems to me that they are happy to spend public money looking for signs of life, but they never close the deal. And they've been shown to deny their own findings when it suits them, such as the label release experiment, if indeed that was conducted on Mars. It seems clear that they are hiding something and convincing most people that there is nothing to hide. They may be hiding evidence of a civilization on Mars, but this is hard now to say with confidence due to their record of denials and faking. We don't know what they're hiding. But I think this is all tying in together with the UFO cover-up, which is what you talk about more here, what we talk about here more too. That they're trying to keep this whole thing covered up, and they're using the Mars rover projects to help them do it. By, stringing along people, this is a science project, this is really interesting, we're at the cutting edge of space exploration, blah-de-blah-de, but well, actually, the cutting edge of space exploration hasn't changed for, 30 years. Not, which is most of my life. So I've read this out before, but I'll read it out again. Let me give you the whole Mars conspiracy in a nutshell. I have no doubt that there is some real mind-blowing stuff going on Mars, and our governments know it. What they have to do is take people's minds off Mars. They send these rovers up there, and they send back pictures of basically nothing. The TV and internet are flooded with these pictures of nothing. Soon the people get tired of looking at pictures of nothing, and don't want to be bothered with Mars anymore. They trust that the government will make them aware of any important happenings on Mars should they occur. Of course, this will never happen. And again, I just reiterate the water announcement as an example. And that's just flipping liquid water, for heaven's sake. Never mind, things beyond that. We, the taxpayers, paid for those rovers. We had a right to know when they were launched and how they landed. We have a right to see the pictures. So they give us 1 million pictures of nothing. Now we're so bored with the pictures that we really don't care anymore. They know we won't ask questions anymore for fear of being bored out of our minds. And it's true. It's sad, but it's true. So basically that was all I have got to show you for tonight. It was just those ideas that the water is nothing new. It's been announced multiple times before in exactly the same way. But now I think I'm more open to the question of actually considering whether these rovers are actually on Mars. And anybody who wants to watch that Curiosity Press Landing Conference, which I think is about 45 minutes or an hour long, or maybe it's only half an hour, I can't remember the exact length. It's not particularly long. You can watch it without too much, time being taken up. I suggest you go and watch it and do your own research. But I think we'll leave it at that for now, and I'll say thank you very much for listening. And obviously, if you want to ask questions, I will take questions.